Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of the Hulegaard Books podcast. As always, I'm your host, David Hulegaard. Now put the kiddies to bed and cover any sensitive ears, because my special guest this week is none other than journalist, author, and native New Yorker, William Vitka. Continuing my series of contributing authors to the upcoming Edge of Oblivion anthology, William joins the show this week to talk about his story, Angel Eyes. When scheduling the interviews for the book, William was a no-brainer. He published his debut novel, Infected, in 2013, and I gotta tell you, it is a definite must-read. Somehow, William's style expertly finds the line between sheer terror and open mic night at the Comedy Cellar, and he weaves elements of both into captivating and page-turning work. But what inspires the man behind the words? How does exposure to pop culture factor into his storytelling process? And more importantly, can sleep deprivation and a bottle of whiskey lead to an endless world of narrative possibility? Let's meet William now and find out the answers to those questions and more. William Vitka, thank you so much for joining the Hulegaard Books podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm waking up. Thank you for having me.
How are things on the East Coast? I've never been out your way.
Really? They're pretty chilly here, and the rat race isn't. I don't even know what to say about the rat race. It's in full steam ahead with the rat race, I guess it would be.
Are you getting some of that polar vortex wind chill or whatever?
You know, they hyped the polar vortex so much that I thought I was going to walk outside and it was going to be like John Carpenter's The Thing, and I'd be desperately searching for Kurt Russell to guide me to work, but it's slightly overblown, I think, for the East Coasters here.
You know, when I saw the memes going around about Sub-Zero standing in front of like the weather chart in the background, it says Sub-Zero wins, I was like, perfect. That's all I need to know about the weather.
I'm really more than slightly concerned that we've all turned into giant pussies, I think, when it comes to the weather out here. It's not that bad if you do something crazy like wear gloves and maybe a hat.
That kind of thinking is just going to get you in trouble.
Maybe, probably. I don't even care.
Well, outside of weather, I definitely wanted to talk to you about writing and books because, as we've been talking about on the podcast over the past couple of weeks, the Edge of Oblivion anthology is coming out shortly. I know I've contributed a story, but also William Vitka has contributed a story. So I would love to talk to you about Angel Eyes.
I would love to talk about Angel Eyes as well, although I confess that it is strange. I don't write a lot of short stories. I have written a lot of short stories, but I don't write them very often anymore. So Angel Eyes was a little weird for me, actually.
Now, what did you tackle subject matter wise? I'm always fascinated to watch your brain at work, so I'm very curious to hear more about this one.
Angel Eyes is a little bit of a reflection of Infected in terms of entering into a brutal world where you don't necessarily know who's who. The bad guys are sort of well defined, but there's also this strange class warfare thing going on in the background that's not necessarily at the forefront of the story, but it's sort of omnipresent, which is something that Infected sort of dealt with. But Angel Eyes, I guess on the face of it, is about a young woman who's lost her family to the upper class. And the upper class has this nasty habit of ruling over this area from the skies, and they don't want to go to the ground because it's become so polluted. And of course, that's where all of our underclass gets stuck. So it's literally a ruling class and an underclass.
For me, a lot of my ideas come from a variety of places. A lot of the times I blame eating way too late at night and then going to sleep. But I'm curious, where do your ideas come from? Like when you write something like Angel Eyes, like what kind of fueled that story for you?
I think I had been reading a book, if I'm not totally mistaken, that was about that assumed that there was going to be a coming class war, which had a very, very obvious impact on Angel Eyes. And I also wanted to develop a strong female character who was so strong that she made men not just nervous, but made men feel fear for their lives.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was a woman who you just absolutely did not want to mess with. If she has any vulnerabilities, it's only that she could get outnumbered or overpowered. That's her only vulnerability. So the idea comes right from a book, basically, and probably staying up too late and drinking too much. And the story is really just her journey from street urchin to taking down, well, let's say putting a big dent in the ruling class.
Very cool. I mean, Edge of Oblivion was such a cool idea, and I really thank Tony Healy for extending the opportunity to us folks that were able to contribute. When I saw the table of contents for the Edge of Oblivion anthology, I noticed that Angel Eyes was given the closing spot, and I'm sure very well deserved. But I'm curious, how does that feel to you as an author to be given such a huge position in the book to kind of bring it to an end and close it out?
Well, obviously, I really want to thank Tony for giving me that spot, but I don't even know how it feels. It feels great, and I'm honored, and it's awesome. I just hope that Angel Eyes makes people happy. I hope that it does its job. I mean, Angel Eyes is a very personal story in a variety of ways. I've never had a closer spot before in an anthology, and as I said before, I'm honored, but that story darn well better make people happy. Otherwise, I'm going to be pretty upset.
Well, outside of Edge of Oblivion, you've been busy working on a ton of works. I actually haven't had a chance to check in with you in quite some time, and lo and behold, as I'm doing my my research pre-podcast, I noticed that you've really been publishing a lot of works over the past few months. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of how your life has changed since Infected, because I think Infected was really the last chance I had to talk to you at all.
Infected was sort of the I don't know if you want to call it a blockbuster exactly. It's as close to a blockbuster as I've had. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
But that rocked the boat in a lot of ways. I have this problem where I just can't stop writing. Um,
As an author, it's a good problem to have.
it's I guess. But I mean, I'm at the point where I'm putting out a book every couple of months, which is probably not a good thing because I'm either going to pollute the waters or burn out or one of those. But yeah, I had 2 or 3 books come out, I guess, over the last year. Infected had been published late 2013 or middle of 2013, and then there were some issues with the publisher of that, and I got the rights back and put it up myself. Thank you to the wonderful people at Amazon who figured out a way to keep all of my reviews together. And then once that went up, I came out with Emergence right after. 4 months after Emergence, I think I put out Stranded and Culture Vultures. So it's sort of been a lot, yeah.
I have to say, I actually had the opportunity to read Infected, kind of middle of last year, and really enjoyed it. I mean, and I'm not just saying that because we're talking here. I mean, it was really a fantastic book that really
Thank you.
kept me glued to my iPad, for many, many hours. I'm sure that my employers were probably a little concerned coming to work without much sleep, but it was worth it. But what I'm curious is, did you originate that as a series? Like, did you see it becoming kind of like a series of books, or did you kind of think Infected was the story you wanted to tell and you'd move on?
No, I had always wanted. It sounds so. I hate it when authors do this because it sounds so pompous. It's like, yeah, I always had this grand vision. There's shit with George Lucas where he's like, well, Star Wars was always supposed to be 6 movies, and that's not true. He didn't even have the fucking. I read this the other day. He didn't even have the Force in Star Wars until the second draft of Star Wars. Huge liar. But yeah, Infected actually was always supposed to be a series of books. Thankfully I had wanted to do exactly what I'm doing, which was started out with something incredibly bombastic like Infected, where it's just constant chaos, and then go back a step and do a prequel and do Emergence, and then go back a little bit further and do Stranded, which is sort of a spiritual prequel, but it's the first time that you would meet the Hrotsa, the giant creatures that end up sort of inadvertently infecting the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm 90% done, I think, with Infected 2.
Wow.
Yeah, like I said, I can't. The writing thing, man, it's pretty constant.
You talked earlier about some issues you had and Amazon being very helpful getting all of your reviews curated back to the book. So I'm curious, like, are you pretty happy with the reception you're getting from readers?
Getting people to read the books is the big issue, obviously. It sounds so clear cut, but if people aren't reading your books, then you don't know how it's being received. Emergence has fewer reviews than Infected, but it was as well received. Stranded was very well received, but it has fewer reviews than Emergence. It's this constant battle where you obviously don't want to break the bank trying to waste money on advertising,
Mm-hmm.
but you do need to figure out a way to get the books out there. There are actually a lot of people in this self-publishing thread on the website Something Awful, which I run. Thread, not the website. Some of those guys are really, really good at it. I mean, this is their livelihood. They make money by self-publishing like romance novels and stuff. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the real money is in romance novels.
I've heard that.
Yeah, the real money is not in giant monster books that I write.
Well, then you and I are both fucked, I'm afraid.
I think so. I think that might be the issue. I mean, it's like, yay, grocery money. There's nothing to sneeze at, but it's tough. It's a hard gig. One of the things that I've heard that works is doing like the Kindle boards stuff, where you hop on Kindle boards and you say, here's a free book in exchange for a review, basically. Mm-hmm. Which perfectly legitimate strategy as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that's supposed to really work is, I mean, if you do want to spend money, it's this website called BookBub, and there's actually a smaller, it's not quite a sister site, but there's a smaller site that does something similar called Book Blast, which I think is a Canadian outlet. But with BookBub, they have this huge email list, and every day they send out, your bargains or your deals. I think the issue is that it's like $180, I think, if you're doing horror. Ah. So you give them $180 and you get included in this email blast, you have the chance to be included in this email blast. They can turn you down, but supposedly that works extremely well. I did Book Blast, which is a much, much smaller email chain or email blast or whatever the heck it is. I did that for immersions. I made immersions free for like 2 days, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And I paid the $20 to be included in Book Blast. And I think that day I had 850 downloads.
Oh, wow.
So the email chains, even though it sounds really silly that like it's 2014, but email newsletters are still a thing, still work really well.
So what you're saying is that I should probably take down my Friendster page because I'm not reaching readers with that.
Yeah, I think if you can build an audience organically, that's great, and that's going to do you a lot of good. But Facebook has actually made it more difficult to do organic reach.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what the heck was it? There was a story in, I think it was the LA Times. It was either the LA Times or Forbes or something else, where they changed their algorithm so that if you have a public Facebook post, the chances of it reaching organically, which means it'll show up in other people's timelines, depending on the number of likes and comments it gets. They changed the algorithm so that shit just doesn't work anymore. You actually have to spend the money on the Facebook ads to get more reach within Facebook, thanks to their algorithm change.
Yeah, actually, I just did a free book promo on my Facebook page, and I reached 9 people organically. So I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
But those 9 people got a hell of a deal.
Yeah. Hooray for those 9 people.
Thank you, 9 people, for checking out that post. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other recent works that you have. Now, you mentioned that toward the end of 2013, you actually put out a couple of new works like Stranded and Culture Vulture. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about those.
Stranded is which would be considered book 0, I guess, of the Infected series. There's going to be 2 more Infected books, and then I think that's it. It's going to be 5 books altogether. But Stranded is sort of the first appearance of the parasite carrier. And on the face of it, it's a very blue collar quasi homage to John Carpenter's The Thing. So you have a camp of loggers up in Alaska. I actually spoke to a guy from Alaska who was in my office just saying like, "Hey, please make sure that I'm not full of crap." And he was like, "No, you're good." So there's this logging camp up in Alaska, and they don't believe that they see it, but they see it, this flying saucer crash off in the distance. And they're totally isolated, but something very nasty comes out of that spaceship.
Dun, dun, dun.
Stranded is really about how just regular blue-collar guys. Now, Infected, there's some weirdness where the people who should not be as lucky as they are a little bit lucky and infected, but there is a reason for that. This is just straight horror. Straight sci-fi horror, no fantasy stuff, no superpowers, nothing. And it's really, really comes down to how good is your chainsaw, that kind of stuff.
One of the things that I actually really loved about Infected was how you were able to balance such a pretty heavy story. I mean, there's a lot of gruesomeness happening, all around, but I loved that you were still able to find a nice niche of comedy so that as we're starting to feel like this is the most horrific thing to ever happen to all of mankind, you're still able to stop and laugh at just some of the quick wit that you put in there with your characters.
Thankfully, that's the That's the benefit of reading Elmore Leonard.
Ah, yes.
Elmore Leonard is the king of dialogue and making sure that there's some levity even in the middle of what seems to be the worst thing in the history of the world. He's the biggest influence on me.
Oh, very cool.
Of course, with Infected, it helps that it's first person. So, the narrator's bizarre comedic thoughts in the middle of a brutal slaughter just sort of crop up and make people laugh, which is very good.
So, I haven't had a chance to read Culture Vultures yet, but I got to tell you, like, when I saw the description for the book, like, even just the description was having me, like, doubled over laughing my ass off. So I would love to hear you talk more about that.
That is the direct result of staying up late with my dad and drinking half of a bottle of whiskey. We developed this idea. I don't remember why I was at his apartment, but we just stayed up late and we were saying, we didn't want to watch this, we didn't want to watch that. So we decided it would be cool if we wrote a book that we wanted to see turned into a movie, basically. It led to a lot of strange conversations. But the crux of it ended up being, we want to do the sort of Blues Brothers get the band back together, but we want to do it because the Earth is going to be destroyed. And then what's a clever way that we haven't seen the Earth, come under threat before? So we decided that, it probably makes sense that if Earth outputs anything en masse that could be monetized, it would be culture. You think about all those all those broadcast transmissions that end up floating through deep space. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing an alien civilization is going to find. It's going to be, unfortunately for us, it's going to be Hitler at the Olympics. I think that was the first actual broadcast to make it outside of the atmosphere.
I kind of hope that if aliens do find our transmissions, that the first thing they find is Miley Cyrus' Wrecking Ball. But that's just me.
You know what? Hey, it's entirely possible. You never know. Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball might actually solve an intergalactic, struggle that we don't know. There's no way to tell.
I would love to find out that somehow it leads to a technological breakthrough and we have like plasma weapons. That's what I hope.
I think that's the only good thing Miley will have done for us. If that's possible.
And now I'm going to begin work on my next short story, Miley Eyes.
Miley Eyes. Miley saves the universe. Anyway, so we decided that if there's anything that was going to be monetized or turned into a commodity by an alien species, it would be our culture output. Basically, it's the Blues Brothers getting the band back together, except the problem is the guys they want to get back together are all dead. So they have to figure out a way to get all these guys back to life so they can try to stop this alien media conglomerate from destroying the planet.
I tell you, I honestly cannot wait to download this book and start reading it. I'm very excited, especially now.
The one sentence description of Culture Vultures.
Sold.
Everything is terrible, and an alien media conglomerate is going to destroy the Earth. There are 5 guys who can save it, but they're all dead.
You heard it here first. 9 people. This will reach organically. Culture Vultures and the plot to steal the universe.
Yeah, I wrote it with my dad, and as always, my brother did the cover. Very, very strange trip.
Well, in between all the writing that you get done, you also have a day job. And I know that being an independent author and speaking with other independent authors, that sometimes could be a really challenging balance, trying to figure out how to do your day job and find time to do all the writing and the energy, really. For some of us, I guess, whiskey works.
Yes, confirmed.
But I'm curious, like, how do you find that balance? What's kind of your schedule to make sure you're finding the time that you need to get this done in addition to making a living?
I'm actually not entirely sure that I'm good at it. Not at all. It's obsessive, I think, for me. Mm-hmm. I have to. So when I wake up and I stumble into the shower and I walk my dog, and I throw my laptop inside of my rucksack, and as soon as I get to the train, I've got 45 minutes to write, so I write. And then I do my job, and then I get back on the train. I got 45 minutes to write. I come home. I see my partner. I kiss her goodnight, and then I go start writing again.
So how many hours a day would you say you're actually writing, like, for your books?
On a good day, I can get out 2,000 words.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. That was Infected. Infected only took me about 3 months to write, I think. And then a couple more months to edit it. That was pretty much it. I mean, it's again, I hate it when authors are like, yeah, it's not a problem. It's totally easy for me to write. But But generally, something that I'm good at is I can sit down and just and put it out and get it out.
Yeah, that's really cool. But I mean, if I'm not mistaken, like you write for a living too, right? Like your day job is involves a lot of writing.
Yeah, it can. Generally, what I'm doing is producing stories more than writing stories.
Oh, okay.
For an online news media outlet. But I don't typically write during the day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm definitely a creature of the evenings and late nights. I mean, I don't get home. I have a very strange schedule. I wake up on Tuesday. I don't get home until Wednesday. So late night writing is something I'm absolutely accustomed to, I guess you'd say. And I've been doing this job for about 8 years now.
Wow.
So yeah, it's part of it is just a force of habit, but it's also obsessive. So I'm not gonna pretend it's not obsessive. It's definitely obsessive.
Because you work, with the news for a good portion of your day, I'm wondering like how much of that are like ever translates into your ideas. Like if you see something like a real world story and you think, well, I could really put a Vitka twist on this. Does that ever happen? Like, are you ever inspired by things that are happening, that you're learning about with your day job?
There was some of that with Emergence. There was a lot of that with Infected's about a journalist. Come on, let's not kid ourselves here. If you're writing about New York and you happen to be a journalist in New York, it's impossible not to pick up on those story ticks, I guess you'd say. And there was an article 2 years ago, I guess, something like that my dad had sent me. My dad's a journalist too. It's kind of like the family gig. There was an article my dad had sent me about the deepest subway station in New York City. So I read that, and that became a thing in Infected. And then there was another piece that was about, the roach problem in the subways. So that obviously went into Infected. With Emergence, there were some stories about construction on the Verrazano Bridge. Some of that went into Emergence. What helps, I guess, more than seeing news stories is just being so deeply involved in the city itself that you're covering.
Mm-hmm.
Infected takes place mostly in Manhattan. I work in Manhattan. Emergence, when I was writing it, it does take place in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, where I had lived for 5 years. Again, this stuff is so stupid obvious that I feel like a fool for even pointing it out. But you should know what you write what you know about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think Mailer had said that you should never write about yourself or something like that. And I think he was the preeminent jackass of literature, because all he did, he would say this stuff, and then he went and he would just write about himself in all of his books. So, like, The Naked and the Dead is basically Norman Mailer. But it does make perfect sense to me to write what you know. Mm-hmm. You're less likely to totally botch something. And presumably you have more expertise than other people who aren't living in, Bay Ridge or New Jersey or wherever the heck it is.
No, it's funny you say that, because I always wonder why, when I write stories, I never set them in places that I've been.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly like reaching out to people I know that live in these areas, and I'm like, hey, can you take a look at this? And I'm like, never right.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, what can really help, what I did with Stranded was I used Google Maps a hell of a lot. It's great. You've got Street View. Google gives you Street View. You're a tourist. You're a digital tourist. You can just plop yourself down on pretty much any street in America, take a look around, and make sure you get the store names right. If you're not doing this basic legwork for a story, and you're just making shit up, yeah, okay, making shit up is great. But if you get geographic points wrong, oh man, come on. We're all writing on computers. We all have Google. It's a free service, folks. Pro tip: use fucking Google and make sure your shit is accurate, please.
And I think that's going to be the title of this episode. We talked a little bit about the challenges of time as a writer, but I'm curious about what other types of challenges that you personally encounter.
I'm very lucky. My partner is, particularly because she's an editor and because she likes the stuff that I write, she's really encouraging. So there aren't any particular obstacles to my writing in terms of time, like finding the time.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly my family encourages me, my partner encourages me, my friends encourage me. The guys in Stranded are all actually named off of one of my gaming groups, and they were thrilled about that. Even though they didn't all survive, they were pretty happy about it. I'm in probably the best position in terms of like my outside influences. There's nobody who doesn't want me to write. There's nobody who says, well, you should really be doing this instead. And I should almost absolutely be doing something else probably when I'm writing, but they're all very encouraging. So I'm pretty lucky.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, I know that my struggle is when I have free time, I feel like I should be writing, and then I find myself doing other things. You know,
Oh,
I get distracted real easily. I'm like, what's that? Titanfall Alpha? I'll say. And then, like after 5 hours of Titanfall, I realized that I could have written a chapter. So,
I mean, yeah, there's some of that happens, but I'm really influenced by the games that I play as well.
hmm
All that crowbar stuff and Infected was because I was playing the hell out of Half-Life 2 at the time. Even my video game playing tends to impact when I'm writing. I get a lot of my ideas out of video games, just moments, because video games are so much better than a lot of other mediums for impressing upon you an emotion.
hmm
Yeah, if it's a horror game, then you're feeling fear and terror, and you can translate some of that fear and terror into your writing. So even though there are video games that are definitely not written well, they can make you feel a way that you maybe want your characters or your readers to feel, and you can pull a lot of that out, I think.
No, I absolutely agree with you, because when I started writing my Noble trilogy, BioShock was such a huge influence on kind of trying to capture that feeling. I don't even know how to describe exactly what it was about the combination of claustrophobia and Art Deco design and just fantastic narrative writing. But that really had a huge impact on me to where I started the series in the late 1940s, just because again, just that was just a playground that I totally wanted to be in, and I could have lived in BioShock. Well, I probably wouldn't have in BioShock, but that was really cool. And the thing I run into is that you never try to purposely outright steal things.
Yeah, that's generally a bad idea.
Yeah, you try not to, but every once in a while something kind of slips past, like I don't even realize I'm doing it, and one of my I've got a couple writing group partners that are very helpful for helping me catch some of that stuff, and I just realized that there's certain things that you can't use because they're so synonymous with video games, even though like Assassin's Creed doesn't own hidden blades, but if you try to work with a hidden blade in your story, it kind of makes people who are familiar with it say like, oh, like Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. Thankfully, I don't know if I've run into any of that. Thankfully, I don't think anybody's been like, nobody's thought that I've just aped stuff yet.
I don't know. I saw that you used the word "the," and I'm pretty sure I saw that in Mass Effect.
that darn. This is an indefinite article? Is that what the is? Thankfully, I managed to avoid some of those pratfalls, but I mean, I mentioned Half-Life in Infected. So I'm hoping that anybody who's like, oh, the crowbar's in there, it's like, but I told you that he was playing Half-Life before. So I don't know. So I usually try to circumvent some of that stuff by just directly naming the source of the influence. I don't know if that helps at all or it just makes me sound like a jerk, but.
No, I think that makes total sense. I think that there's a lot of appeal for kind of the demographic that I would say you and I are probably both writing for, which is kind of that 18 to 34 sweet spot, right? That love kind of like pop culture and whatnot. And I think that like when you include little pieces and little elements of pop culture that are somewhat familiar, it kind of it increases the enjoyment, I think, for that demographic. At least that's my hope, because when I encounter it in other people's work, I'm always like, yeah, that's awesome.
Dropping names.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think one of the other things is that directly naming products and items that people would see in their day-to-day lives. It's something that Stephen King does very well. Mm-hmm. In The Mist, when Stephen King's got all of his characters in that supermarket, they're not eating random stuff. They're eating Hostess and Coca-Cola and this, that, and the other thing. And part of it just makes this totally fake bullshit world that you've created more identifiable to the reader. Mm-hmm. So I think you're right. I think that it does just bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah, 100 years from now, if people are somehow able to find our books in like, penny clearance bins, they're going to thumb through it and be like, what the fuck is Twitter?
Oh yeah.
But I think for the time being, I'm okay with it.
Have you ever run into that where you feel like something technological that you've mentioned in one of your books is going to be totally outdated in a few years?
I've strongly considered whether or not that could be an issue. Where like you want to make jokes that are relevant because you're selling the book now. So
right.
You want people to be able to laugh at like a Facebook joke or something like that. I think it's okay because even if years from now, You know, like it'd be like the same way that, you know, we pick up a book, you know, like a vintage book, and they talk about phonographs, and we're like,
Right.
phonograph? Where the fuck was your iPod?
Lols. Yeah.
But yeah, I find that like it's the technical stuff I'm okay with. It's like current slang sometimes, like that's the kind of stuff I shy away from, because
Oh yeah.
there's things that I'm like, who the fuck's gonna know Rafflecopter in like 10 years, right? Like I don't even know anybody that knows it now. No, but seriously, like that's the kind of stuff I try to avoid.
Yeah. Same here. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So you talked earlier about working with your brother on, I'm sorry, was it Vitka's Grimm? I would love to hear more about that, because I went and checked it out after you sent me the link and was watching the Goonies video. And I mean, like, it totally like derailed me for half an hour of work time, but it was absolutely hilarious.
Vitka's Grimm is sort of a strange beast that we're getting wrangled over the next couple of weeks and months, I think. But it had started initially just as a way to promote the books, because my brother's a writer as well, in addition to being an illustrator, and he's going to have a book coming out hopefully in the near future. And we had just sort of wanted I guess like a social media home for it, so that we could blatantly say like, hey, check this book out now, it's on sale, that kind of stuff. And then it sort of grew into something else, because we were asked by a website on the lead up to Halloween to do a review of a terrible movie. And the movie was called Lizzie. And it was absolutely, it was so bad that the only way to get through it was to make fun of it. And so we did, and then we realized, well, you know, we could make this like an additional piece to like a complimentary piece to the review. And we recorded ourselves over at sort of Mystery Science Theater 3000 style.
Nice.
And then we cut the film up so that our jokes lined up. And it ended up being like 6 or 7 minutes, I think. I can't remember exactly how long. But everybody loved it. They thought it was hilarious, because it was just a terrible movie with very funny jokes over it, and who doesn't like that?
Absolutely.
And then Sean and I decided, well, you know, we could probably do more of this, and we started splicing up different movies and taking movies that, even though you didn't think that they were related on the face of them, they actually matched up perfectly if you did the editing properly. Like Brad Pitt's way too serious World War Z and Shaun of the Dead. So if you take the reaction shots from Shaun of the Dead and you splice them into World War Z, it ends up being really funny. And we have actually, thankfully, won all of our copyright suits so far. I'm not even kidding. The guys who made Lizzie tried to get our video taken off of YouTube, and we were like, no, you can't do that. You can't just, you made a shitty movie, and you cannot come after us for making fun of your shitty movie. So we won that battle.
Did they think they were up for an Oscar?
You know, I really don't know, because the way the copyright stuff works with videos in particular is a little wonky.
Especially now with YouTube, you know, they're changing user agreements and whatever.
It's the user agreements, plus it's the algorithm that they have to match content. So they sort of digitally store every film ever made in their servers, and they run these content checks. But it's just an algorithm. There's no human being there. It's just an algorithm. So if someone files a copyright notice, or if their algorithm finds out that like this happened with, what did we make fun of? The Happening. There's this one particular scene, like frame in The Happening, that just happened to match up with their algorithm. So we had to contest it and then edit the video slightly to take out that one frame, and then we were fine for some reason. I don't really know how or why. But it's a lot of weirdness, and you need to actually know what you're doing from a legal standpoint. Mm-hmm. But I highly encourage people to make fun of movies. Anyway, Vitka's Grimm started off. Vitka's Grimm started off as a publishing thing, and now we're doing some video. And I think the hope is to grow it into something a little bit larger and different, and it'll actually be pretty cool when it happens. Although I don't want to say too much at the moment.
All right. Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
So we've covered so many different things. Like I'm almost hesitant to ask you. I mean, what's left in store for 2014?
Well, 2014 hopefully will be the cool announcement that I mentioned a few moments ago. I also have my first non-horror, non-sci-fi book coming out.
Is it your romance novel?
Yeah, I am. so clearly a budding romance novelist at heart. The first line in Infected is he skull fucked a whore to death. So there's romance right there. It's a thriller. It's a crime thriller actually coming out. It's called Bartender, and it's pretty good, I think. I'm terrified because I've never written anything that's not horror that doesn't include monsters in it. My partner is whispering that it's great over my shoulder. I don't know. But that's pretty good. And then obviously after that will be Infected 2.
Oh, very cool.
Yes. Which is, if you thought Infected 1 was bananas, this is so much stranger. It's just, oof. I don't even know how to.
Pineapple?
I don't know. I don't know how to describe Infected 2, to be honest with you. It's sort of like a road movie, but man, it's weird. It is really strange. Just putting that out there.
What about timeline? Like, when do you think we're going to see some of these works?
I need to get the cover locked down for Bartender, for my crime thriller, but hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months. In keeping with my weird obsessive put out a book every 6 months thing. And then Infected 2 will probably be near the end of 2014.
Very cool. So you've got more happening with Ficta's Grimm. You've got a couple of books. Wow. I'm tired just thinking about everything you've got coming.
It's okay. Bartender's kind of short, so don't worry about it.
Well, then I think we have about expended our time. But William, thank you so much for joining us on the Hulegaard Books podcast. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me waste looks like 47 minutes of your time.
Oh, that's okay. By the time this is cut down, it's going to be like 8 minutes.
Thank God. I don't think I can even listen to myself talk for 47 minutes.
All right. Well, William, thank you so much. Take care, and we look forward to seeing what you have next.
Absolutely, man. Just remember the monsters are real.